Well, I'd like to talk a little bit about the inner workings of the real estate industry. As being past president of the Lakeland Association of Realtors, or now Lakeland Realtors, and involved in the state level with being a political key contact. Now you are the secretary of the board.
Yes.
And I mean, I was probably president probably 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you've just went through your strategic planning.
Yes.
And Tim Weishire was your guest there, and
He was amazing, by the way.
I know I've known Tim for a long time, and he's fantastic. So maybe for the people out there, the public and the realtors, quite frankly, that just don't show up, especially right now with the NAR stuff that's going on. I think NAR has a crisis of value and identity of like, okay, what do you actually do? And they do a lot, and so does the local and state boards of, behind the scenes, the people that are involved, what's going on, just good, bad, indifferent. You tell me.
I'm not understanding.
So, like, if you're a realtor or a real estate agent looking from the outside in, or a consumer from the outside in, because I think all consumers, we've Kleenexed or Xeroxed ourselves, right? I don't think that there is a difference between a realtor and a licensed agent, but I don't think the public, they just think all licensed agents are realtors because there's so many of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one is where the value is for using a realtor versus a licensed real estate agent, and for an agent that maybe thinks that I'm only a member just so I can get access to the MLS.
Right.
Like, hey, don't go on social media and post what you think when you really have no idea. Why don't you ask the questions? And so tell me a little bit about your experience of getting involved and what you're going through and kind of your evolution of leadership. Because I think when you first started, it was like, I don't know what this is. I'm like, well, get involved. And now it's like, okay, well, yeah, I can see it. And where we need changes, what we need to do. And
Yeah. So I will say that the real estate industry is probably the most misunderstood industry that I've ever really seen or have been a part of. And in the sense of, with all the lawsuits and things going on, there's a very strong disconnect between the facts and reality that's been laid out within either the realtor ethics or FREC law, or here's how we're supposed to operate as an industry, versus what people are feeling and seeing and experiencing in the industry. And so the lawsuits, I feel like, people have been taken advantage of by people who aren't following the rules.
Right.
And they're saying that, hey, how you're doing business is not how you're supposed to be doing business, but yet we've already outlaid how we're supposed to be doing business. So I think to me, the common denominator is there's this wall here of how we're supposed to operate versus how a lot of agents, and I wouldn't say a lot of agents, maybe a small percentage of agents are operating,
right?
But it's the one bad apple ruins the bunch.
Correct.
Right. So when I got into real estate, I didn't understand the industry.
Right.
I had no idea why we're doing what we're doing. What is a realtor?
Right.
What is a real estate agent? What's the difference between the two? Why are we called realtors, and why are they making such a big deal that it's realtors and not realtors? Well, grammar. And so what I've really found out as I've been involved is that realtors are, the term realtor denotes being a member of the National Association of Realtors.
Right, and local and state.
Right? So it breaks down, so it's three. So it's your local, it's your state, and it's the national level, right? And so we have a much higher ethics that we have to abide by than just being a regular licensed agent.
Right.
So there's that level of, I think, professionalism outlined saying, hey, this is how we're supposed to handle, this is how we're supposed to operate with the public. Here's how we're supposed to operate with our other professionals. And then here's just how we should be operating just as an industry as a whole, to make sure that we're protecting customers and we're protecting the people who we're doing business with.
Correct.
The other side of that is, as realtors, what people don't realize is that we are actually on the forefront, if not the forefront, of protecting home ownership.
Oh,
and protecting
for sure.
private property rights.
I go to Tallahassee every year, and I used to go to Washington, D.C. a lot. I wish I could do it more, but, you know, when you start a family and things like that, do you get different priorities? But, I mean, every year there's always something. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people that don't, and I think that's one of our biggest challenges and our biggest failures as a realtor organization is not letting the public or the realtor members know how much advocacy that we do. You can't just send it out in an email or a Facebook post. Like it's the one thing, and a lot of times people don't know what we did because we killed a bill or we stopped something or we changed something before it even went to the floor. So then it's like, okay, you know, nobody really cares until it affects them personally. And they were going to put sales tax on commissions or all services. So barbers, it didn't matter what it was. So, I mean, that was years ago. And I remember that we killed that. They were going to get rid of the second home cap on sales tax at 10%. That was going to sunset. Now it's in perpetuity. So now your investors and your people, and then in your retirement, a lot of people get second homes, you know, and they're working their tails off, and they can budget for that. Everybody thinks like, oh, well, only the wealthy have the big homes on the beaches. There's a lot of people that have small retirement homes, and they own them dually for years just so they can pay them off. Well, to know that a municipality or whatever can't jack up the rate all of a sudden because they can, that helps a lot. Estoppel fees, people were charging thousands of dollars for printing out paper. Essentially, we got that stopped. Sales tax on business. I mean, I could go on and on and on, and the public doesn't really see it. And the only time they'll see it is if it affects them. Like if it were going into place, it's like the homeowners insurance right now. We've been working a lot on that, and that's not something that's going to change overnight.
Yeah, well, people don't realize too, like when you talk about the insurance, is like who is the person who's there in front of legislation
right.
to like make these changes.
Right.
It's Florida Realtors. It's the National Association of Realtors.
Yeah.
Like it's the realtor organization that are on these at the forefront. And I would say the biggest weakness and the biggest strength that we have as a realtor association is transparency.
Right.
I think our biggest strength is the fact that everything's laid out. It's transparent to a T how we're supposed to do things. But then on the flip side of that, we're not as good as being transparent to the public and like bringing that information out so everybody's aware of what's going on. And I think
another one, like on the national level, you go to Canada or any other countries, they don't have a 30-year FHA, 30-year mortgage. It's killing Canadians because it gets rescored every couple of years. I mean, that is something that's unique to the United States, and you know that allows home ownership for a lot of people. And the realtors have to fight for that every couple of years or every year. If somebody comes in and said, why are we doing this? You know, where's the value? Where's the benefit? Because there's always somebody up there who wants to plant their flag like they did something. But so again, nobody knows what's going on until it affects them. If you got rid of, could you imagine if you got rid of the 30-year mortgage overnight?
Yeah, it'd be a nightmare.
Or the interest rate got rescored. So a lot of these people that were, working, and then in 5 years, they're all adjustable arms, and now it's 8%. I mean, that would put people out of their homes. They get foreclosed on.
Yeah, well, something that the upcoming president for Florida Realtors, Tim, talked about is when he's sitting in front of his sellers, the conversation is, hey, I'm a part of a realtor organization that has set things up to even allow you and I to have this conversation about you taking advantage of like your home and being able to use the equity to like further to better your life financially, whatever that is. He's like, the Realtor Association is, whether people see it or not, is at the forefront fighting to make sure that everything is protected. Homestead, the homestead tax exemption, insurance reform.
Right.
So when people say like, well, what's the value of like being a realtor? I was like, well, as realtors, our day in, day out responsibility is to protect your rights and private property rights. It's not just getting access to the MLS.
Right.
And so it's the way us being able to do business right now, like that's the value. Like you're here, you're doing business. And if we weren't, so you've stated, say, hey, if like the Realtor Association no longer existed, like how would that change our business?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, ultimately, to not have anybody to advocate for the industry would be a huge detriment overall.
But see, I think, well, the beauty is their strength in numbers. We're the largest trade association in the state, but also I think that's the downfall is the numbers. Right. So you're involved now as being secretary. Now you're going to the state level meetings, and you're seeing the people that walk those hallways and are involved. I mean, they are fighting for the industry, and they're fighting for their realtor practitioners, and they're doing a lot of great work. But I don't know how many people show up. 2,000 out of 200,000 plus realtors. So I don't. The real estate transaction is up there with weddings and graduations. It doesn't happen very often. So the public doesn't really know, I think, if they're using a realtor that is either bad or inexperienced. They just don't know. Like if I go and my doctor tells me, hey, you need to do this, that, I just have to assume that he knows what he's talking about. I don't know. He could be a quack, right? And you don't really know until it's too late.
Right.
So that advocacy and making the profession better is good, but I also think that the floor is too low, right?
Sure,
so
yeah.
You and I are having these conversations, and we do it in the office a lot, and in our company, we're always looking to be better, but there's a lot of companies out there that, hey, the bare minimum is 14 hours every 2 years for your real estate licensing through Florida Real Estate Commission, and that's it. And as long as you're doing that, you're in compliance. So I talk to people at FREC and DBPR, and they say, well, it's the broker's job to make sure that the agents are trained. I said, yes, but it's the law that says it's only 14 hours. There's a lot of brokers out there all over the country that they just want transactions, right? Mm-hmm. And as long as they're not getting sued and the agents are compliant for the 14 hours, okay, no problem. Yeah. Their product isn't exceptional service and quality. So I think that's if the real estate industry wants to raise their status in the eye of the public, they need to either make it more difficult to join, or the state needs to make it more difficult. I think we're probably one of the easier licenses to get.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're talking about, and I think we're in the same realm as, insurance and, a lot of the legal professions for the size of the transaction and the complexity of it. It's not just click, click, click. I mean, you get a contract, you got to negotiate the contract and then renegotiate. And what if it's FHA, USDA, there's so many things. What if there's sell buyer's property? I mean, there's a ton of stuff, but it's only 63 hours. All those other professions, there are thousands of hours and lots of courses. And I think that needs to change. Now somebody like, I like selling real estate, so I'm going to get my license online and I'm going to join somewhere where I know my friend, and all I need to do is do 14 hours every and there's no ill intention to. Yeah. I'm not saying that they're bad people or they don't lack the ethics, but I mean, heck, we're learning stuff all the time. I mean, it's crazy the stuff that can get missed in a transaction.
Yeah, the perception that real estate is super easy. The amount of times I get friends come up to me, or even people are like, yeah, I'm having a hard time with my job. It's like, I think I'll just get my real estate license. That's easy, right? Like selling houses. And it's just like,
it's easy to get the license.
The barrier to entry to get into real estate is so low.
Yeah.
But the work, getting your license doesn't mean you're going to be a good real estate agent. No. Like, it doesn't tell you the amount of work that you have to put into, that you're a marketer, you're an admin, you're a therapist, you're all these things
all of it.
To people, and that on like a very, very high level, that is, there's few things where you have like 5 roles and responsibilities, like, and that's the true nature of an entrepreneur.
Right.
You're carrying all hats until you can get to the point that you can start taking the hats off because you're hiring somebody else or doing something. So to me, I agree.
But you're still responsible even though you're hiring it.
Yeah. And so for something like that, and to have the legal like implications of not understanding
Right.
what you're doing as an agent. So when you come in, it's really scary to get these agents that come in 2 years. They're like, well, what's an escrow? Like what? Like
Yeah,
What,
I mean,
you
that's
like,
101.
Like what does it mean to like what are the closing costs in the contract? What does a buyer have to pay? What does a seller have to pay? Like how does the process work? Does it really take 30 days to close on a transaction? What do you have to do with the mortgage? Who's the lender? What does title work? How are you supposed to hold title?
Yeah.
How are you supposed to do all these things in a transaction? That's like, well, I'm not an attorney. Here's an attorney, but you should understand how the contract works. And so when people get into real estate, I think the barrier to entry is maybe like the barrier to entry is either too low or the education that needs to continue is too low.
Right.
But to me, that's where I think the responsibility in part is with the association.
Right.
Is to help train these brokers to better understand, like, hey, this is your roles and responsibilities. Here's how we can train you, so you know what's responsible.
Yeah,
what you're responsible for,
they've-
and then so that way you can also.
And they've
go.
done stuff like that. Like they have the board certified realtor and they have the C2EX commitment to excellence. But again, that's only if you want to subscribe to it. So you can give the brokers the tools, but if broker XYZ ABC down the street doesn't want to do it, they don't have to.
No.
So yeah, I definitely agree. And the I think the only difference between a licensed real estate agent right now and a realtor, the barrier entry is one passes the state exam and does their continuing ed, and the other does the same, and then they do the code of ethics. Well, I can do that online. Click, click, click. Right. So what differences does that really make if it's, I think, watered down?
Yeah.
The ease every 2 years. Okay, well, I did my code of ethics and the book came in the mail and all the answers are right there and I just bubbled them in and sent them off. Right?
Because people don't understand the value proposition, and I think realtor associations do a bad job
Right.
of letting people know what the actual value is. Like, what's the difference between a licensed agent and a realtor? And so, to me, the difference is the advocacy part. It's the ability to actually look and get a deeper understanding of the industry. And not only that, to me, it's having a seat at the table. And that was my biggest change.
Right.
Is like, as a realtor, you have the ability to have a seat at the table to actually affect real change in how our industry is.
Oh, yeah.
So for all those realtors that are just like, well, what's your value? Why? Like, how are you helping me? I was like, cool. So you'd rather let other people make decisions on how you do business.
Right. Yeah, somebody told me a long time ago, if you're not involved, if you don't have a seat at the table, you might just be on the menu. And I'm like, you know what, that does make sense. Like we had the Super Bowl last night, right? Which I fell asleep before halftime. I mean, I like sports, but I'm not going to stay up late to watch it. But, you know, I can go ask, I don't know, I could probably go poll 100 different realtors or people in the public, and they will tell me every stat, you know, more than I ever could care to know about either team. But then I could ask them about, hey, do you know about this legislation that was going to be passed that affects your property insurance or your taxes or, you know, whatever. And on the same token, I could go ask a bunch of realtors and you could back me up on this. And I'm like, okay, what's paragraph 12? You know, what's escrow or whatever,
Right.
You know, and there's a lot of them that won't know off the top of their head. And so I think there's a lot of people where the importance of it and getting involved, you can see that like, wow, there is actually a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And if more people would be involved, I think we would be in a much better position, or we had less people just doing it. I mean, to be part-time, to screw around with real estate and you're dealing with somebody's largest transaction, I don't know, that makes me nervous. You know, would you hire a part-time attorney that just kind of got their law degree, which really, you know, you're talking 3 years, or a part-time doctor or a part-time whatever?
Yeah, I think it's
level, you know?
I don't know. I think that part is subjective because I when I got into it, I was part-time.
Right.
But like I also went through the process of understanding the contract and knowledge and everything like that.
I'm saying like it's very rarely somebody comes, say, out of college or out of school and goes right into real estate and said, there's a lot of people that transit. I'm talking about part-time is I just want to have my license.
Yeah.
And I'm at a company where they don't have office meetings or whatever. And I have my license, right? I'm not talking about part-time of trying to support your family while you're transitioning in the career and learning.
Because you have these part-time people that have been in it for 20 years and they have the knowledge, but then they put it part-time and they aren't really updating their knowledge and education. So if you've been part-time for 5 years and you're not keeping up with all the changes in the industry, that changes drastically. Like when I was working with somebody who was older, like they've been in the industry for 45 years.
Right.
And then they're like, I've been doing this for forever. I'm like, I remember the contract was half a page.
Right.
I'm like, it's 12, 13 pages now.
14, yeah.
Is it 14 now? It changed. I mean, it was 12 pages when I got in, it was 13, then it was 14. And
I've interviewed agents that are somewhat active, and I asked them about, how are they handling the new law, the Floor and Buyer Act, and some of them are like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's a pretty big deal, and that's what I'm talking about. Is look, I'm not talking about hours. I guess I'm talking about maybe bandwidth in your in your responsibilities. I mean, I know some part-time agents that are on top of it as far as hours are concerned, but that goes back to, as long as they take their code of ethics every 2 years and they're 14 hours every 2 years, they're fine.
Yeah, 'cause it's not enough.
There's nothing in the code of ethics, and there's hardly anything in that 14 hours, or even the class that teaches you anything about the contract.
Right. Yeah, it's not enough, the continuing education that we have to stay on top of the industry, to understand, because the profession changes so drastically, which is what brokers are supposed to be doing. Like their job is to make sure that they are aware of up-to-date information, to disseminate that throughout their agents and make sure they're operating. But we all know that that's not really happening. Should it happen? Yes. Is it unfortunate that there's agents who have brokers that aren't keeping up, with what's going on? Yes. So I don't know what the answer is to have the industry as a whole get better, but you will say, like, the professional agents, the brokers, the people that are on top of it. You talk to the top producing agents and the top producing brokers, 100%, they know exactly what's going on in the market. They know all the details. They know, like, they know
the nuances.
Their eyes. Yeah.
They know, they know if a buyer's going to sell a buyer's property, well, maybe I should do a kick-out clause or whatever. Not what's a kick-out clause, right? And that's why I tell you guys, like, I don't expect you to know every single addendum word for word, because there's so many of them, but I expect you to know that they exist. Like, oh yes, light bulb, let me go research that and go on. But I mean, the good thing is there's a lot of really bright and smart people in the industry that are going through leadership. You're one of them that wants to make it better. But the bad thing is there's so many people that I don't think, they just don't have a clue. Okay. They just don't care.
That's why you just follow the 80-20 principle.
Yeah.
The 20% in the industry are the ones that are going to really take it seriously. And, even the 20% of that 20% are the ones that are going to take it to the level of really try to have positive influence in the industry. But the 80%,
yeah.
Like,
I and the really cool thing is being in Polk County and Lakeland, the majority of the brokers and the agents that we deal with, they're well informed. Like, and if I see something that's out of ordinary, I can pick up the phone, have a friendly conversation with either them or the broker, and it's nice, right? Once we get something under contract, we have the same goal in mind: is get our buyers and sellers, our customers, what they need to the finish line. And we understand that. But when I was like a broker over in Hillsborough County, there would be times where I would see egregious stuff. I mean, you'd be shocked, and I'd call the other agent, and they'd be like, well, that's what I did. I was like, well, can you talk? Good luck talking to my broker. Click. Like, I'm just trying to help you out so you don't get sued or in trouble. I mean, you've got like federal, you got fair housing violation, you got MLS violations, you got FREC violations, you got contract misrepresent. You got all of them. Like, you hit the trifecta and you're hanging the phone up on me. Yeah. I'm not calling to tell you you're terrible. I'm just trying to help you because, we have half of the side of the transaction. So it is nice to be, here in Polk where most of the people really do care. Yeah. And if they don't know, they're humble enough to say, okay, yeah, help me out.
Yeah. And I love that. I mean, we're smaller here. But I love that when you talk to most of the brokers and the agents, they understand, like, what their actual job is,
Right.
if that makes sense. So for here, like in the state of Florida, we're automatically transaction brokers.
Right.
There's a way to operate as a transaction broker than there is as a single agent.
Correct.
We don't have single agency unless there's something in writing stating
Right.
that it is. So all these agents are running around as if they're operating as single agents.
Right.
Like, yes, they're your clients, but like you have a duty to the transaction. Like
Right.
not necessarily a fiduciary duty to one side or the other. Like, so when you mentioned like, hey, once we go under contract, we all have the same goal,
Right.
of getting this to the closing and making sure that the buyer and the seller
Yeah.
can like move forward. And when that happens, then we get paid.
Yeah, don't let your ego get in the way.
Yeah.
We're operating in that four corners of that contract, and let's remember that. I'm not buying the house. You're not selling. It is your customer.
Yeah, we're helping people buy and sell a house.
Sometimes customers can make it difficult. That's our job,
Yeah,
right? It makes
you
you
know.
appreciate the easy ones, but it's all of that. So, your take about the industry since you've gotten in and now your leadership positions. How do you feel the way the industry's going? Any things you think we could do better, or anything that you see that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean the industry as a whole, I'm excited about it. I'm happy to be like a part of it.
Right.
The issues that I see, I think ultimately it's the word that I have is transparency.
Yeah.
Like the issue that I see is that we're not transparent enough and we're not vocal enough about how our industry operates, what we're doing in our
Right.
industry that is a positive impact on private home ownership, on the realtor community. And I think even for our local association and what we're doing, like a lot of the conversation is, hey, how can we make people aware
Right.
of what's going on? Not only how can we make people aware, but how can we support brokers and agents to make sure that they can function and be successful as agents?
Yeah.
And I felt like I'm now 5 years in, but in this 5 years, if I didn't have somebody like you who has really been helpful and like, hey, here's how we're going to guide
Yeah.
you. Here's how you become knowledgeable. Here's like the updates and staying updated on things. I come across a lot of agents that like, and no fault really to them. 'Cause
They don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Is, man, like, how can we make sure that everybody in our industry is operating at a level that protects their
Right.
customers, protects their job, and that they can actually be successful agents? So I think we've done a really bad job of just not really getting that information out.
Right.
And I see this as a whole, like, and I think that to me, this is where the lawsuits come in, is that there's a bunch of agents out there, or I wouldn't say a bunch. I go back. There's probably like a handful of agents out there that are operating how they should not be operating.
Right.
But
I've had agents and they were trying to do flips and stuff like that. And there's a right way and a wrong way, but the short, like, look, if you're doing what you're doing, you probably shouldn't even have a real estate license.
right. But I say,
And they don't.
yeah.
Now.
But I say like perception is reality.
For
So even though we have all this stuff laid out in writing that says like, here's how we should operate, here's how we make sure we protect everybody, here's how we keep on the up and up.
Right.
Like there's still a handful, and that handful is always the ones that get up in the public and write about it.
Sure.
And so now the
Again,
industry,
nobody throws a fuss until there's something wrong.
right. And so now when you talk to friends and family, like they look like, oh, I hate realtors. Realtors are this, realtors are that. I'm like, no, it's not. It's,
Right.
It's the far like minor percentage, and it's really frustrating for those who are trying to do it the right way.
Right.
But you put your head down, you do the work, and things always work out. So to me, that's been the negative. And then I think the positive of where we're going, there's a lot of influence that's changing things. Like technology is going to change how the industry works.
Right.
But there's still going to be
I even hear that every year for.
yeah. But it is though.
Yeah.
Like, so when you look at it, it's like Facebook. And when it came in, or when the internet came,
Yeah.
like stuff happens where how you just like live your life will change. Technology, I think, in the real estate industry is started to really make an impact, but the fundamentals are still the fundamentals. Like people still want to interact with somebody who's knowledgeable. So how are we using technology to enhance what we're doing, but doesn't change that like the person to person touch,
Right.
And so I think if you really just focus in on being about people and advocating on behalf of them,
Yeah.
and just doing that, we'll see a really positive change, I think, in the market. But moving forward, I think the market's great. I love being a real estate industry. I love
great.
To me, being involved in the Realtor Association now has really got me an insight. Like, wow, like, so I'm a RPAC major investor.
Yeah.
Because I just really believe in like what's happening. So the Hometown Heroes program, Florida Realtors, when the pandemic hit, Tim was like, he told the story of Tim Margie, who's the CEO, and all these people, like the night it hit,
Right.
like it was like 3 a.m. They all got up. They all were a part of the group that actually made sure that we as realtors could still operate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
could you, sir, we've got some colleagues in offices up in different parts of the country, and they were shut down.
Yeah.
Could you imagine?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what I would have done.
I would not be in real estate right now.
Yeah, I mean, we would have. I mean,
Yeah.
you got a family, and they tell you that it's essential. So yeah, a lot of those things.
Yeah. So seeing that and realizing that is like, hey, like if you really understood what realtors did for you as a realtor,
Right.
and for you as a homeowner, you would not really think twice about the value of like why you're a part. Yes, we have our MLS dues, and yes, we have all that kind of stuff, and which has been great.
But, with the income that we make, that's not a lot to operate a bit, to have a business, and you can say, well, I got to spend, I don't know, $1,500 a year on the basics.
Right.
I mean, if you're complaining about that, you're
Yeah. To get licensed for $1,500 to $2,000 to be able to make a 6-figure income is pretty mind blowing.
Yeah, you go outside and start any other business. I don't care what in the world it is for that much. And I think that goes back. I think we need to raise not necessarily the bar, because there are people that are, like yourself, that are operating at at a very high integrity. You care about the industry, so that's there. But also there are people that just want to just get in and whatever. So I definitely think it needs to be more challenging to either get or keep your license. For sure.
Yeah.